for another flash of genius, Lou Ferrante. Lou.
I'm happy to be here. I thank the Economist for inviting me. They really thought outside the box when they brought me in here. They really proved put their money where their mouth is. Yesterday, I listened to the lady from Christie's who said, Amy Capolazzo, who said that she looks for something a little outside the box, maybe a failure on a resume. And I thought that was interesting because I came home from prison with 3 violent felony convictions, listed as a member of the Gambino crime family, and I had no idea I could have got hired at Christie's. I was looking in the wrong places. But what I could say to really, I have so many things to say about business and how the Mafia code of values that I learned in the Mafia. Believe it or not, the Mafia does have a twisted code. It's not the most ethical code, but it was a code. And some of the things that I learned in the Mafia, I carry with me today. To respect people, it was a big thing about honor and respect. And treat people who you do business with correctly. Paying promptly is just as important as collecting debts. The deadbeats fall away. They get a bad name or they end up in the trunk of a car. So there was a lot of things I did learn in the mob, but what I think I should talk about to lend as much advice as I can to this event is human potential, which is the ability to change yourself, and that's what I did in prison. When I went to jail, I was arrested by the FBI, the Secret Service, and the Nassau County Organized Crime Task Force. The FBI said that I answered directly to the heads of my family during the Gotti era. They said I answered to the Gottis. I was accused of pulling off some of the largest heists in U.S. history. I headed a crew of Gambino family associates, answered all directly to me, and I went right to the boss. That's in my federal paperwork. I was convicted. I hired William Kunstler, the late civil rights attorney. He was one of my first lawyers. I went through 7 attorneys before I fired them all and began to study law and represent myself. But how that came to be was in prison, I first realized that the code, the values that we had learned in the mob were fading away. They were eroding. And once those rules were broken, we were broken too. And I wanted to leave the mob. So it wasn't the moral behavior that I first questioned. It was, I believed in this life. Where did it go? What happened? The things the old timers taught me aren't applicable anymore. And that's something we have to learn in business. When we let the values fade away, we end up in a crisis like we just ended up in, this global crisis. There has to be regulations. There has to be some type of honorable laws, rules to follow. Otherwise, if we let our primitive instincts go wild, this is what we end up with, a mess. But the ability to change myself was the big thing. In prison, I picked up my first book, began to read, and fell in love with books. I left the mob, and I taught myself how to write. I read 20 hours a day for 8.5 years. I taught myself how to write by studying, because you don't have writing classes in prison, studying the masters of 19th century fiction. Everything Victor Hugo knows about writing is in Les Mis. Everything Tolstoy knows about writing is in War and Peace and Anna Karenina. Everything Flaubert knows about writing is in Madame Bovary, and so on, Stendhal, etc., the Bronte sisters. So by reading these books, I would sit in my cell, which was no bigger than this rug that I'm standing on today. And I would pace back and forth and read, and sometimes I would recite Old English aloud. I fell in love with Shakespeare, Chaucer, Boccaccio, Petrarch. I fell in love with all the greats. I read Homer, philosophers, etc. I was more free in this prison cell than I had ever been in my life. If you lose your job, and we have to reinvent ourselves as a person or as a country, if I did it, anyone can do it. I had no resources available to me, just books and the freedom of the human brain. And it's a 3-pound brain. It's a little piece of flesh. Somebody mentioned yesterday that it's a small brain, but the wisdom of the universe is in there if we just want to take a little solitude and explore it. That's important too. Even to this day, I always find a little solitude. I moved upstate. I live in the mountains now. I enjoy my life because I can't be in a congested area constantly. I need some peace of mind. And that's when we reassess ourselves, when we ask ourselves the important questions that move us forward in life. If we're honest with the answers. That's another thing. I was honest with myself. I knew I had done wrong. The FBI said, please cooperate. We'll give you a new identity. We'll send you to anywhere you want to go, Caribbean island if you'd like. It's up to you. Just give us some information, and we'll give you a new life. I did what I did. I deserved to be punished. I wasn't going to walk away and point the finger at everybody else. Had I witnessed the robbery and the police asked me who did it, I would tell them. but I took part in the robberies. I took part in the criminal activity. I was a loan shark. And by the way, my rates were a lot cheaper than Bank of America and all these other banks today. And there was no such thing as an adjustable rate loan. I knew the guy had one income. He has got one income. He makes X amount a week. He can only pay X amount a week. I can't tell him I'm giving you the loan shark money on an adjustable rate. It might go up. But anyway, these are the things I faced in regular society. And the other thing is when I came out of jail and I went for a mortgage, I never paid taxes. I never had a credit card in my life. And they handed me a few $100,000 in a matter of minutes. And I said, we're done. Nobody should have gave me that kind of money with my record. And I happened to be one of the good risks that they took. But the millions of foreclosures proved that it wasn't a good policy. But anyway, there is a lot to learn from the mob. I wish I could talk forever. I have a little bit of limited time. But the message that I want to give everyone is that we can reinvent ourselves as a people, as individuals, and we can reinvent ourselves as a nation and as a global civilization. It's been done throughout history. And sometimes the worst times, if we could get through them, turn out to be the best times. And that was what happened to me in prison. The worst thing that could have ever happened to me, cockroaches crawling all over me. I lived through a race war in Lewisburg Penitentiary where the Aryans hacked to death 2 black Muslims. And I'm sitting there watching blood all over the place going, what am I doing here? But the worst times turned out to be the best times for me because I'm here today talking to you people. Thank you.
Lou, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great. So one of my favorite TV shows is Kitchen Nightmares, where Gordon Ramsay goes into restaurants and sorts them out. And I gather you are piloting a reality TV show where you go into businesses and bring a kind of mafia mindset to how they could improve their businesses. Is that right?
It's correct. I pulled out of the closet the old me. I wrote a chapter in my book, Leave the gun, take the cannolis. Leave the violence behind. Take the sweet things you learned in the mob and apply them to life. And that's what I did. And I straightened out a business and a family for the pilot. So hopefully everyone will see it.
So let's say we put you in charge of Bank of America. What would you be
Well,
doing?
the first thing I would do is I'd send several hitmen to dig up holes in Staten Island so we could bury some people. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. They need a complete overhaul. They need regulations. They need a code. They need people to holler and scream at our officials that things have to be put in place right. They're creating, as we speak, in the midst of this crisis, they're creating new ways to defraud poor people with credit cards. I recently read a book by Chuck Morris who talked about it in one of his footnotes. It was very interesting. I think that things have to be, I love freedom. I lived in a cell for 8.5 years. Nobody wants freedom more than me. But freedom with limits. We can't be allowed to just run wild. That's anarchy. And when we do that in business, look what we get. We can't allow that. And we should feel bad because it reverberated across the globe. I couldn't go to my capo when he asked where the Shylock money is. Well, I packaged it up and sold it as a credit default swap to some gangster in Switzerland.
No, I mean,
he would have said, what are you kidding me?
Maybe you can confirm this rumor. I mean, I'm told that the best mafia bosses all look to Goldman Sachs as a model. Is that right?
We look to Goldman Sachs to try to rob them too. But no, yeah, they would be a perfect model for the mob today. They make the mob look like a bunch of Girl Scouts today. Yeah.
So that's a joke, everybody. And we'll just for legal reason. Any advertisers in the room?
I buy cookies once a year. I'm kidding. Yeah, too. Yeah.
To be slightly, so earlier you're not the first person to mention the mafia during this conference. We had a discussion yesterday about the scene in The Godfather where it is said it's nothing personal, it's just business.
Strictly business.
Strictly business.
Yeah, it's true.
Is that? We're all rejecting that view over the last 2 days. We've all said, actually, we've got to be more authentic and personal, and it shouldn't just be about business. Is that weakness on our part now?
Believe it or not, the mafia, if you attached yourself to a good mobster, for all the things you've read about or heard about John Gotti in the newspapers during his heyday, he was for the underdog. He was a personal guy. He stuck up for people. He wasn't strictly business. There were people in the mob who were like that. Personally, I stayed away from them because I knew they could turn on you in a minute and I could end up in the trunk of a car. So I handpicked the mob guys who I wanted to hang around with. The Mafia is a family like any other company. It's like a corporation, I should say. And you choose to hang out with after work or during work the people you want to hang out with. More so in the Mafia than in a company, I should say. But yeah, actually, we had a little more freedom in the Mafia. But it is strictly business with limits and depending on who you're talking to. I think you need to have mercy with people too. There has to be a balance.
And sort of sabbaticals from the BlackBerry and all that kind of thing as well. That's part of it as well. Right, one question from the audience. Anyone like to yeah, right at the front here. Hi. There's a mic coming down for you, if you just say who you are.
Stand up. Okay. Hi, I'm Terry Darlin with Christian Dior Cosmetics, and thank you for in 10 minutes completely changing my idea of anyone who's in the Mafia, because really, you did that. But my question is, and I've read several...
We love them now, don't we?
We do, you know? Do you want a job in cosmetics, is what I want to... But first of all...
Why are we all working in a legal business? Let's all turn to crime.
You'd be a great hire.
Oh, fantastic.
So, and my human resource person is here, so she'll attest to that.
Well, now you're talking about serious crime.
Now we're talking about serious crime. So my question is, you know, I've read several autobiographies of people that go to jail, and, you know, it's a disaster, which we... Yeah. So what was that moment? What was that catalyst that made you say to yourself, I'm going to change this?
It was a gradual process in which my mind started to see the people that I believed in. I loved that life. I knew nothing but the mob. I was a thief from when I was 13. I graduated to running my own auto body chop shop, to hijacking trucks, to running my own crew within the family. I knew nothing else but crime. But there were gradual things that happened. When I was in prison, I would see the old-timers starting to bend the rules. I found out that friends of mine who disappeared, and you didn't ask questions, you automatically assume they went against the Bogata, the family, when they disappeared, and you didn't ask questions or you'd be next to go. Well, when I was in prison and everyone's indictments were laid bare on the table, I would understand that people died for greed. And although I was willing to execute the orders of the family, I couldn't kill somebody for $1 trillion, and that's not how we were raised, to kill people for money. The old-timers who brought me up in that life said, we don't kill for money. If somebody offers you $1 billion in gold right now, you just don't kill nobody for money. You kill when there's like a country has people who commit treason against the country, and we execute. We shouldn't execute. I don't believe in the capital punishment, but we do. You know, there are reasons like that in the family where people go. But so I started to question the values that I was raised with and said, I could have been killed. And then people were informing. I refused to inform. I willingly took part. How could I go free and now have a clear head, like Sammy the Bull Gravano, who ratted on John Gotti, killed 19 people, and they called him an American hero. This is disgraceful that our country would call this man an American hero for cutting himself another break. That's all he was doing. He didn't change. I changed. Yeah, I changed. Yeah, and you know, I thank the UK because they bring me into their prisons in the UK. I've been to Downing Street. They've awarded me for going into their prisons.
That's not a prison, technically, Downing Street.
Yeah. That's great. That's great, yes. But I thank the UK. The Americans are yet to bring me into a prison, and that hurts me. But anyway, the decisive moment of change was I was in solitary confinement, and I had an argument with the lieutenant who was in charge of the hacks, the prison guards, the screws. And I reached through the food slot, and I went to grab his tie, and I pulled it off his neck. It was a clip-on. And I said, it's a clip-on. This is before I changed. I said, it's a clip-on, you dirty bastard. And I threw it back at him. And he says, he looked through the reinforced glass at me, and he says, you think we'd wear real ties with you animals in here? He says, look at you, you're an animal in a zoo. He says, you're in a cage. And I couldn't leave that cage without being handcuffed with a chain around me, a black box on my wrists, and shackles. I was an animal. And because I couldn't even conform to the rules of prison, I had to be locked up in a smaller prison within a prison. So he was right, and it made me think. And by the time I got out of the hole, I asked my friend, who was a former caretaker of John Gotti's social club in Queens, Fat George DeBello, I said, can you send me books? Because I didn't know anyone who read. He had tattoo verses from the Bible on his arms and legs, and I figured maybe he read a book. Yeah.
Well, Lou, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I do...
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks.
Okay.
And, well, thank you.
Thank you.